What if you discovered by chance that someone very powerful was about to be betrayed, and the only person who could stop him was you? Lena was just a waitress, used to being ignored by millionaires. But one day, while serving a table, he heard something he shouldn't have. A plan to deceive and destroy a billionaire businessman. She could have stayed quiet. You could have pretended you didn't hear anything. But he decided to warn. What she didn't know was that this choice would change her life forever, because the next day a luxury car appeared at her doorstep, and with it an invitation to a game much more dangerous than she could have imagined. Café Bellagio was packed that morning. The smell of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the expensive perfume of regular customers, most of whom were business people and high society people. Lena balanced a tray with 3 cups and deftly dodged a distracted executive gesticulating on the phone. Her shift was almost over, and she couldn't wait to ditch her apron and put her feet up. She stopped next to the table where Marco and Bruno were sitting. Both were frequent customers, owners of Argos Tech, and, according to business magazines, geniuses in the technology sector. But for Lena, she was just 2 more millionaires who saw her as part of the coffee scene. Today, however, the two seemed more excited than usual. "To the billions to come," Bruno toasted, raising his glass of sparkling wine. "By the billions," Marco repeated, smiling before taking a sip. Lena discreetly rolled her eyes as she poured the coffee into the cups. Ah, the wonderful world of the rich, he thought. She walked away, but stopped when she heard Bruno answer his cell phone. "Yes, everything is fine. The idiot has no idea. Once he signs, I get everything." Lena blinked. Her instinct told her to continue serving other tables, but something in the way Bruno spoke made her hesitate. "Yes, tomorrow he transfers everything to me, and the next day he will be outside his own company without even understanding how." His heart sped up. She looked at Marco, who was still smiling, completely oblivious to the betrayal he was about to suffer. She could pretend she didn't hear anything. He could ignore it and continue with his life. But something inside her stirred. Bruno got up, saying he needed to take another call outside. Marco was left alone, scrolling through his cell phone screen. Lena saw her chance and, without thinking much, leaned slightly towards him. "I know I'm just the waitress and all, but maybe you shouldn't trust your friend so much." Marco looked up at her, surprised. "Like this? He wants to steal your company. Now, do you accept sugar in your coffee?" Marco laughed, clearly thinking it was a joke. "What?" Lena sighed. "And I heard the conversation. He plans to outwit you. He'll make you sign something tomorrow, and after that you're out of Argos." Marco frowned, looking at the door where Bruno had left. "You may have misunderstood." "Oh, of course, because the idiot has no idea I get everything can mean a lot of good things, right?" Marco was silent for a few seconds. "And why would you tell me that?" Lena shrugged. "Because I don't like fake people." He watched her expression for a moment and then smirked. "Well, I appreciate the concern, but maybe you misunderstood. If I were in your place, I wouldn't ignore this information. But who am I, right? Just the waitress." Marco was thoughtful. Before he could respond, Bruno returned to the table. "What were they talking about?" Lena smiled politely. "We were talking about coffee. It looks like tomorrow is going to be a big day." Marco looked at her for a moment before nodding, without taking his eyes off her. Lena walked away, picking up another tray. She tried to go back to work, but she felt Marco's gaze on her. During the rest of the day, Marco seemed less excited and watched Bruno with renewed attention. At the end of the shift, Lena went to the employees' locker room. As she took off her apron and picked up her bag, her co-worker Sophia looked at her curiously. "What was that on Marco's table? Were you hitting on him?" Lena let out a short laugh. "If I wanted to be fired, I would find a less awkward way." "So what was it?" She hesitated for a moment. Let's say I heard something I shouldn't have and decided to tell it. Sophia raised an eyebrow. You are brave or reckless. Maybe a little of both. Lena grabbed her coat and walked out the back door of the cafe, still feeling the adrenaline from what she had just done. The night was cold, and she hugged herself, walking home. Would Marco believe her? Would I do something? Or had she just gotten herself into much bigger trouble than she imagined? The next morning, he would discover that his life was about to change completely. Lena woke up to a loud noise coming from the street. She rubbed her eyes and went to the window, still drowsy. When he looked outside, his eyes widened. A shiny black car, the kind she only saw in spy movies, was parked in front of her house. No, it can't be for me. The engine was running, and a man in an impeccable suit got out of the driver's seat. He looked directly at Lena's door, holding a white envelope. She held her breath. A scam? A subpoena? Some millionaire angry because she got herself where she didn't belong? The doorbell rang. Lena took a deep breath and opened the door. Miss Lena? It depends. If it's a charge, I've never heard of this person. The man kept a serious expression and held out the envelope. Mr. Marco asked me to deliver this in person. Lena blinked a few times. What? The driver did not respond. He just handed over the envelope and went back to the car. The vehicle drove away smoothly, leaving Lena standing in the doorway, holding the envelope as if it were going to explode. She closed the door and tore the paper anxiously. Inside was a silver key and a short note. Thanks for the heads up. I think we need to talk. Address below. Marco. Lena stared at the message. Right. Now I've definitely stepped into a spy movie. For a moment he considered ignoring it, but his curiosity won out. The address took her to a luxury building. The doorman was already waiting for her and handed her an access card. Mr. Marco is waiting on the roof. Of course it is, Lena murmured, entering the elevator. The door opened to a gigantic apartment, the kind of place where even the air seemed purer. Marco was sitting on the couch, holding a glass of whiskey. You came, he said without taking his eyes off her. Look, if this is a bribe, I'll let you know that I'm not difficult to buy. But I need to know the value. Marco laughed and indicated the sofa. Sit down. We have a lot to talk about. Lena crossed her arms. So, do you want to explain to me why a billionaire sent me a luxury car instead of just calling me? Let's say you gave me a valuable warning. She sat up and faced him. Did you investigate? Marco nodded. And I found things I didn't like. He picked up a tablet and slid his finger across the screen. My lawyer found suspicious contracts. Bruno has been embezzling money from the company for months. Lena let out a sigh. Then he's a professional traitor. And I need your help to catch him in the act. Lena laughed humorlessly. Oh, of course. The billionaire needs the waitress. It makes sense. You were the only one who heard the conversation. And more importantly, she was the only one who told me. She thought for a moment. What exactly do you want me to do? I need you to collect information. Lena raised an eyebrow. Are you serious? Very. She crossed her arms. What if I say no? Marco smiled. You can take the key and never see me again. The apartment is yours, regardless of what you decide. Lena's eyes widened. Wait, what? It's a gift, for the warning. She blinked, speechless. Do you give apartments to everyone who saves your skin, or am I special? Let's just say your honesty impressed me. Lena looked at the key, still in disbelief. If I agree to help, what exactly do I have to do? Marco leaned forward. Let's take Bruno down. Together. Lena smirked. Oh, this will be fun. Lena turned the silver key in her fingers, still trying to process everything. Just so I understand, You want me to infiltrate your company and spy on your cheating partner, and in exchange, I get an apartment. Marco smiled. Basically, yes. She laughed in disbelief. My life until yesterday was serving coffee. Now, suddenly, I'm a corporate spy. This escalated quickly. You noticed something that no one else noticed. I need that skill. Lena crossed her arms. And how exactly would I help? Bruno is closing a suspicious contract. He thinks I'm distracted. But if I make any wrong move, he can get ahead of himself. Lena snorted. And I'm plan B because he would never notice me. Marco nodded. Exactly. She sighed, looking at the key. Okay, boss. Where do I start? The next morning, Lena was at the front desk of Argos Tech, holding a visitor's badge. I can't believe I accepted this, she muttered to herself. The building was a temple of glass and steel, where people seemed to move at double speed, always hurried and busy. She headed to the company's in-house cafe, where Bruno used to drink his daily espresso. Lena? She turned around and saw a man in a suit, sharp eyes, and a discreet scar on his eyebrow. You must be Raoul, she said, recognizing the investigator hired by Marco. And you're the waitress turned secret agent. I prefer elite security consultant. Raoul smiled. Here's the device. Put this in the boardroom. He handed over a small recorder. Lena swallowed. Okay, nothing more. Just plant a listening device in a billionaire's company. Normal life. At lunchtime, Bruno entered the meeting room, talking loudly on the phone. Lena, pretending to clean the coffee table, quickly slid the device under the main chair. This contract needs to be closed today, said Bruno without noticing his presence. If Marco suspects something, everything could fall apart. She gritted her teeth. The guy was really brazen. When Bruno left, she took out her cell phone and sent a message to Marco. Lena, Bruno is nervous. He said he needs to close everything today. Does that tell you anything? The answer came in seconds. Marco, it means we're running out of time. At night, Lena found Marco and Raoul in the apartment. The recorder picked this up, said Raoul, playing an audio file. Bruno's voice echoed in the room. Marco has no idea. When he signs, I'll take over everything. Lena crossed her arms. I have to ask, do billionaires always blindly trust their best friends? Marco sighed. Apparently a common mistake. Raoul smiled. Good news? We got him. Now we just need to get him to bury himself. Lena raised an eyebrow. And how do we do that? Marco leaned forward in his chair. Tomorrow Bruno will try to make me sign this contract, but this time the contract will be a trap. Lena smiled. Ah, I love a good plot twist. Marco's office was too quiet for such an important day. Lena watched from the side of the room as he reviewed the documents spread out on the table. Are you sure this will work? She asked. Marco looked at her with a half smile. If Bruno is as greedy as I imagine, he'll fall just fine. Lena sighed. Excellent, because I definitely don't want to play amateur detective for nothing. Marco closed the document folder and stood up. Are you ready? Well, I've survived this far without being fired or murdered, so I guess so. The Argos Tech meeting room was immaculate, with a large glass panel displaying the city in the background. Bruno arrived punctually, carrying a black briefcase and the same confident smile as always. March, he said, shaking his friend's hand enthusiastically. We're finally going to close this, Marco smiled back. Yes, finally. Lena was sitting discreetly in the corner of the room, pretending to review some papers. She watched as Bruno took the documents and slid the paperwork across the table. It's all here. You just need to sign on the last page. Marco picked up the pen and hesitated for a second before signing. Bruno glanced at Lena, who kept her expression neutral. Something wrong? He asked. Nothing, replied Marco. I just like to make sure I'm doing it right. Bruno laughed. You were always cautious, but you can trust me. Oh, I trust. Marco finished signing and pushed the papers back to Bruno. Congratulations, partner. Bruno took the documents and smiled satisfied. I knew you would make the right choice. Lena crossed her arms. What will the police think of your choice? Bruno froze. What? The door to the room opened and Raoul entered, accompanied by 2 police officers. Bruno Costa, you are under arrest for financial fraud and embezzlement of corporate money. Bruno turned pale. That's a mistake. Marco took a copy of the documents that Bruno had just signed. These contracts have been changed. What you signed now doesn't give you control over Argos Tech. It confirms all fraudulent transactions in your name. Bruno's eyes widened. Did you set me up? No. You armed yourself when you tried to deceive me. The police handcuffed Bruno, who was still trying to argue. Marco, you can't do this. I was your best friend. Marco approached him. And I really thought I could trust you, but apparently I was wrong. Bruno was taken away by the police, still protesting. Lena turned to Marco. Wow, that was dramatic. Marco laughed. You helped a lot. Yes, but now comes the big question. Do I finally get free coffee for life? Something better. Marco took out an envelope and handed it to her. Lena opened it and saw a contract. Wait, is that a job offer? Director of Corporate Security. She looked at him surprised. So I went from waitress to investigator, and now I'm head of security for a billion-dollar company. You've proven you have a talent for this. Lena smiled. It's okay, but I still want the free coffee. Marco laughed. Closed. 2 weeks later, Lena was sitting in the office of her new room at Argos Tech, watching the city through the huge glass window. His cell phone vibrated with a message from Marco. Marco. Still regretting getting into this? She smiled before responding. Lena, not at all. End.